Good day or evening. I hope all is well with you. Welcome to Filling Your Soul, living with meaning and purpose through the wisdom of the Kabbalah. I am delighted to welcome Rachel S. Heslin as our guest speaker. Rachel has been immersed in the study of psychology for over 35 years. Her father, a clinical psychologist, taught his children his craft, such that Rachel has been refining her analytical and reframing skills since a very young age. Rachel is currently the author of 2 books, Navigating Life, 8 Different Strategies to Guide Your Way, and Rituals of Release, How to Make Room for Your New Life. Rituals of Release is the first book of her Making Peace with Your Past series. Upcoming books in the series include Deeper Sorrow, Greater Joy, Healing Through Grief, and The Power of Self-Forgiveness. Her work through her company, The Fullness of Your Power, helps people embrace all parts of themselves so that they can live deeper, richer, and more fulfilling lives. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Leah. I'm delighted to be here.
Likewise. Well, let's begin. Rachel, in the Kabbalistic teachings, living a meaningful and purposeful life is a key concept. Can you be so kind to share your thoughts about living with meaning and purpose and your personal journey that has led you to its fulfillment?
I personally believe that God has placed yearning in our hearts as a guide, a sign of what our direction and our contribution is to be to the world. I believe that each of us does have a unique contribution. Unfortunately, lots of us, maybe even most of us, find it very easy to get caught up in what we think we should be doing. We're constantly surrounded by societal expectations. If this is who you are, you should be doing this. You need to be practical. You need to please your parents. You need to live up to their expectations. Your friends, how do you be popular? Who am I in relation to other people? All of this is very natural because human beings are social creatures. We learn who we are and how we fit into the world, at least in part, by our interactions with others. Therefore, it's like the part of us is watching us like, is this right? Is this right? How do we do this? What am I supposed to be doing? Especially when we're young, we don't know how the world works. We're trying to figure it out. And our parents, we don't realize it at the time, are human as well. And they see their children very often as a reflection of who they are. So they try to get their kids to be a certain way as a reflection of who the parents think that they should be. Did that make any sense?
Yes, I totally agree with everything. I'm on board with everything you're saying.
I mean, I actually had very personal experience of this because if I may go into a little bit of family history, my father wanted to prove to his father that he could be a good dad. Now, in order for my father to prove that he was a good father, he had to have a perfect child. So I felt like I had to be perfect all the time. I was very intuitive as a child. I was very quick. I picked up on things. And this sounds like a good thing. Unfortunately, it sometimes meant that people expected more of me than I was capable of giving. Because I understood more than they expected of someone of my age, they expected me to know everything. And I thought I was supposed to know everything. And because I didn't know everything, I learned to fake it. I started to pretend that, well, of course, this is what it is. Are you familiar with the work of Carol Dweck and mindset about
Ab-
fixed versus growth mindset?
yes, I am. It's a wonderful theory. Yes,
Oh,
and I agree with her theory completely. I was brought up the other way till I saw what she was saying. Yeah, go ahead.
exactly. I developed a fixed mindset because of how I was picking up on other people's expectations. Because I did not live up to those expectations, I believed there was something wrong with me. They said, "Oh, you should do this," but I'm not. So my life shifted to pretending, to trying to prove, to creating a facade to get other people to think that I was what I thought they thought I should be. This was not a very comfortable way of living.
No, it sounds like a very difficult undertaking, a kind of a burden.
It was exhausting. I was constantly afraid that people would find out. So it's like, oh, I'm not that. The problem is people can sense when you're pretending. There was always a wall between myself and other human beings. And because I didn't realize what was going on, because I didn't realize that I had this false notion that I was not capable of learning. In fact, when I finally read Dr. Dweck's book on mindset, and she mentioned that one of the symptoms of a fixed mindset was shame at not knowing. When I read that, that was a total light bulb. I was so I thought it was a horrible thing that I didn't know, and I didn't realize, no, it just is. If you don't know something, it's okay. You're not supposed to know everything. You're not supposed to understand everything. Part of our purpose here in life is the exploration and the learning, the process of living. I mean, you talk about living with meaning and purpose. A lot of that just comes down to living. What can I experience today? What can I learn from yesterday? What new things will come to me that I didn't know before? How does this change how I look at the world? So it's a matter of deepening one's experience and one's immersion in life throughout the journey.
Oh, what a difference that your mindset was changed and that you could cut yourself slack and realize that the other way was not the true way and not the authentic way.
Oh, it was a complete revelation. All of a sudden, I say all of a sudden, but it was a series of epiphanies because our minds are not light switches. It's not like I am now enlightened and everything is perfect and I understand everything and now I'm happy. That's not the way that we experience life. We experience in layers, we experience in dimensions, we experience in facets. So I would relearn this lesson over and over in different aspects of my life. So, in one area, I was completely immersed in the experience of learning and being open and that evolution and growth. And yet, in a different area, I was still stuck and thought, oh, I can't do this. And had to come to a realization, hey, wait, this whole growth mindset applies here as well. Like,
Yeah,
huh,
that's beautiful. Yeah, because we all suffer from that, from overcoming our ego and what we're supposed to be, and it's real tough. it's it's we feel shame if we, like you say, if we don't do exactly what we our ego thinks we should do.
exactly. I mean, one of the things I talk about in my book, Navigating Life, is you hear the term people pleaser used as almost an insult. where it's like, oh, you're just a people pleaser. You're always trying to make other people happy, and you should stop being such a victim. And that's not the way that it works. You need to understand where it comes from. The whole idea of feeling a need to please or placate or have other people like you is on some level a survival issue. It goes back to when we were little kids. If you disappoint your parents and you're 3 years old, they can leave you on a curb somewhere and you're going to die. Now, whether or not they would actually do that as a 3-year-old, you don't know that. You're still trying to figure out how it works. And if your parents get angry, that's fear, even if it has nothing to do with you. Say dad had a bad day at work and a coworker said something or got credit for something he did, and he was really upset, and he came in and you could just feel the anger coming off of him. If you're 3, the world revolves around you. You don't know it's not your fault. You don't know that whether or not you're going to be punished. You develop these fears inside. Now, part of brain development is there are certain stages that our brain goes through. Through the ages of 1 till about 3, your neurons are expanding like crazy. There are gazillions of them. And about between 2-3 years of age, the brain shifts and starts neural pruning, where the ones that are used more often strengthen, and certain brain neurons that aren't used as often deteriorate. It's kind of like if you have an apple tree and you have 37 billion apples, that tree is going to weaken and you're going to get lots of little tiny apples. But if you clear out a bunch of them, the apples that are left are going to be strong and healthy and juicy, and the tree itself will be healthier. That's kind of what happens with your brain. We go through one of these shifts between around the age of 3. We go through another shift around the age of 7. And then there's an adolescent brain shift that is a period of several years where the frontal cortex expands. These are just things that happen as a natural process of development. The reason it's important to our experience is we process information coming in. We process our experiences differently at these different stages. And when the brain shifts, they get locked in. So here we are as an adult, and we get nervous whenever we're around a large man, and we don't know why. It just happens. We may not know that when we were 4, we had a traumatic incident when a large man was angry with us and something happened. And that was stuck in our psyche, but we're not consciously aware of it. This is actually really important. It's not just the brain shifts. If trauma happens, you're familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder. When we're in a traumatic situation, in certain circumstances, the brain gets stuck. Normally, something happens, our brain has ways of processing it, of running through, of analyzing, saying, okay, this is what happened, this is what it meant, this is what we learned from it, we're okay, we move on. But in some cases of trauma, that gets stuck somewhere in your brain where it can't be processed, and all it does, it continues to trigger, and we feel like we're helpless. We have anxiety attacks. We get in situations we know in our brain that we're overreacting to the specific situation, and it gets frustrating, but it happens. And some of it does have to do with the physiology of the brain itself. I seem to have gone off on a tangent.
No, it's important information. And even like you're saying, a trauma in this life, if people believe in lives before, who knows what could cause it? And it's part of a person's psyche and their cells or whatever, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So do you recommend anything that you let people kind of think over what happened, even though they don't remember the incident? And
For myself, I have found there's a therapeutic technique called EMDR. Let me see if I can remember what it stands for. It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's something that is done by a licensed therapist who's trained in the technique that utilizes the same physiological aspects of REM sleep, rapid eye movement, to dislodge the trauma from the stuck part and move it into the reprocessing center.
Mhm.
Some people have found a lot of relief from a technique called tapping, which I personally have not used, but I know people who have found it very useful, where you identify where in the body certain trauma has gotten stuck. And by tapping on that area in a rhythmic pattern, it kind of loosens it and sets it free.
Yes.
It doesn't have the same psychological reprocessing as EMDR, like on an intellectual of reevaluating the situation, but it can help loosen the knee-jerk trigger response and the emotional physiological response, which is incredibly helpful because then that allows you to look at the current situation more as it is than from the lens of this other situation, which may not actually be relevant.
Right. Well, I agree. The tapping, the EFT, whatever people call it, is
Yeah.
definitely, the research shows how effective it is. It's wonderful. So thank you for suggesting that, and thank you for sharing your personal journey. So Rachel, what tips can you offer to listeners that can teach and inspire them to connect to their passion and live their dreams?
Pay attention. Listen to your heart. That's something that it's said almost as a cliche, but there has been recent research that shows that we have neural networks that exist outside of our brain, outside of our head. Uh, I don't know if you've ever touched something hot and jerked away a split second before you realize, hey, that's hot. Part of the reason of that is we have analytic neurons in our fingertips that can make that decision to react before the message gets to our brain and comes back. Our neural systems don't just live in the skull. What they found is there is a neural network which is located around the heart and another one that's located kind of around the solar plexus. So when you hear people say, listen to your gut or listen to your heart, there is research that shows that we are gaining information from those areas. And each of the three primary neural networks, the cognitive, the heart, and the gut, are responsible for different types of information processing. We're most familiar with the brain of the skull, cognitive one, where we think. And that's excellent for analyzing incoming information and asking questions of looking at what is this? What might this mean? Now, the heart holds on to our deeper values. You can feel kind of a constriction there if you do something which is counter to who you are as a person. If you think you should be doing something and it just doesn't feel right, if your heart feels heavy, that's an indication that you are doing something which is in conflict with your deeper values. And then there's your gut, which is responsible for safety. When they talk about trust your gut, if you think something's wonky about a situation, that means that your gut neuron system is identifying something which may not be safe for you. Now, having said that, we can go back to talking of our experience of trauma. It's possible that there's nothing wrong with the situation, but you need to listen to that feeling and accept that as information that you may need to learn more about a situation before stepping forward. Each of these three centers of processing have very important roles, and we need to learn to use them together in order to identify what is the right path for us. That's something that I try to make very clear in all of my work. In my book, Rituals of Release, I use the word release because we're not denigrating anything. It is quite possible something can be completely wrong for you. It twists you in knots. It makes you sick. It is not what you are supposed to be doing. But it is absolutely perfect for someone else. The idea is not to denigrate anything, but to recognize what is your path? What is your contribution? And one of the ways that you can recognize what is your contribution is that yearning, that space in your heart that says, oh, yes, I want that. And it's interesting because sometimes it can show up as being completely obsessed with another person, whether it's someone you know or a celebrity, or there's just something about them that draws you in. It's like, yes, I need this person in my life. But the truth is, it's not necessarily that person, but there is some quality about that person that is calling to you, that is calling to something inside you that wants to come out. And in my own life, a few years back, there was this actor that I was just completely obsessed over. There was something about him that I was just fascinated. I couldn't figure out what it was. I was watching every movie he was in, listening to all these interviews. What was it about him that so fascinated me? Eventually, I recognized that the quality that drew me towards him is he seemed to be completely present, regardless of what role he was playing. You got the impression he was always there, just that wholly and completely embodied in who he was. And I realized that at that time in my life, I was spending way too much time in my head. I was thinking about stuff, and there's nothing wrong about thinking about stuff. But I had lost my connection with being present, with connecting with other human beings. I was talking so much, I wasn't able to listen and simply be. Once I recognized that that was what drew me towards this other person, I started working to cultivate that quality within myself, started practicing breathing, becoming aware of my sensations that were around me, being more in my body, even exercising more, looking around me, immersing myself in nature, listening to other people, and truly hearing what it was that they were saying, being more curious. What were they experiencing? Once I brought these qualities into my own life and started expressing them, my obsession with this actor just kind of dissipated because it had served its purpose in allowing me to live my own life more fully and in greater congruence with who I wanted to be.
Wow, this is wonderful, very insightful. The 3 neural centers is amazing information. And also, it's something that all of us, I know that I can relate to, because people can go off the path and get hung up on, like we see a person that's similar to you and you don't realize that, and you're wasting time and energy, and you could be just instead understanding and like you said before, gaining meaning from the experience so that you can utilize it to find your passion and live your dreams and listen, like you said. So thank you. That was very, very wise and insightful.
Thank you.
Okay, so Rachel, how can we all remain positive and continue to move forward in the face of personal inner and outer challenges that are part of the human condition?
This may sound a little counterintuitive given the nature of the question, but I believe that it is important to cultivate the ability to grieve. Life doesn't work the way we want it to an awful lot of the time. Many years ago, I had an experience where someone I had known not very long. We had just met. I really liked him. I was really looking forward to getting to know him better. He was a musician. I wanted to share his music with my family. And he was killed in a terrible accident. And I was devastated. But on one level, I couldn't figure out why was I so torn apart by the death of someone I had only met once. Looking at it, I realized that grief has a purpose. And the purpose of grief is to honor our losses. And the losses don't just mean, in fact, the losses are not of what we had, but what we are losing is our expectations, what we thought we would have in the future.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, all the stuff that I was looking forward to would never be. We need to learn to honor our dreams when they have been shattered. We need to grieve that things that we thought would happen never will. Because life does that to us. Life rips away futures that we had envisioned, and we need to take the time to honor that and mourn the loss. I mean, look at the Jewish tradition of Shiva. There it says very specifically, this set of time you are to do nothing but mourn. And then there's the next set of time of, okay, you can start easing back into life, but you need to honor this loss. And then
Right.
there are the stages of moving through it. The reason this is important for moving forward is if we don't allow this time to process and grieve and honor, it gets stuck. It can be like that trauma that prevents us from creating a new life. But we can't, if we have that pain, if we try to ignore it, it doesn't go away. It just festers. It's like if you have an apple with a bruise in one side. If you have it on a shelf and you face it towards the wall and say, oh, look, it's just fine. But on the other side, that bruise is growing and it will destroy you from the inside.
Yes. I hear what you're saying. What you're saying is that there is the grief, and the problem is people don't recognize the grief or don't welcome the grief as part of a healthy process, and that you'll always have a loss for certain things. It'll always be a part, like a compartment for you. But when you work through the grief, then, like you say, you have the energy to go forward. And you also, for instance, if you just love someone and they're gone, you are allowed to let the love flow instead of constricting it and having it fester.
Oh, yes. And that love is so important. I know I have a friend whose father recently passed away, and she said she was afraid to cry because she thought it would never stop. But the truth is that it goes as long as it needs to. And yes, it may feel like you're crying forever, but there will be times when it's like, okay, this is enough for now. But it's not that you get better. It's not that, okay, I'm done grieving and it stops. You talk about having that compartment, and in a way, it changes who you are. It deepens your feelings. In the title of my next book comes from it's a paraphrase of Khalil Gibran of the deeper that sorrow carves into my soul, the greater my capacity for joy. It's allowing yourself to feel and just allowing it to flow. Because when you allow it to flow, it keeps going. It doesn't get stuck. It doesn't become stagnant. And there will be times, years down the line, when you're perfectly happy, life is joyful, it's wonderful, and you smell a dish that your mother used to make. And all of a sudden, grief wells up inside you. Feel it and acknowledge, yes, this is honoring the memory. This is honoring the love. And this is part of life.
Right. It is so important to experience it and welcome it in and know that it is a further healing for you.
It is.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. So, Rachel, I greatly appreciate your participation, and I just wondered if there's any last thoughts that you can leave with us today.
I think my greatest desire is for people to accept that they do have a unique contribution to make to the world, and it has value. So often, there are things that come easily to us, and because they come easily to us, we don't recognize that they do have value. But the truth is that if there is something that calls to you, if there's something that comes to you naturally, that may be your contribution. Because life is not intended to be a struggle. Life is meant to be a joyous collaboration. A lot of our journey is simply how do we recognize and release all the things that get in the way of living life joyfully.
That's true. In other words, if we would change our mindset and receive the challenges as something that are that's an opportunity for us to work through and to strengthen our skills and strengthen our muscles, spiritual muscles, whatever,
Yes.
then we wouldn't walk in feeling freaked out,
Exactly.
anxious, whatever.
Yeah, no, I think you make a really good point because, like I said, it's not flipping a switch. It is exercise, it's practicing, it's what else might be possible. It's looking at what can I do in this moment to try to find a little extra grace. What can I do in this moment to stop, to pause, and just take a breath, look around? People talk about, well, I can't meditate because my mind wanders. Just breathe for 3 breaths and say thank you. And just start with that. Maybe next time, do it for 5 breaths. Say thank you. I love you. It's going to be okay. It is a practice. Our entire life is practice. I say if we knew it all, if we were perfect as everything, there would be no reason for us to be here. Life is our jungle gym.
Right, it is. But looking at it in those with that perspective, it makes a person feel that it's an adventure too, and it's a
Oh,
gift. It's a
yes.
gift, and it's just gratitude for what it is, and for being here, and every little thing that we have, food or a bed,
Indoor plumbing.
right, exactly. So it's great to embrace the blessings. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Again, thank you for all your wisdom, your insights, and you really gave some wonderful tips for everybody. I hope that everyone enjoyed it. I know I learned a lot. And so, Rachel, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Probably through my website, which is thewholenessofyourpower.com. On there, I have several resources. I've recently started writing in my blog again, but there are lots of articles there. Also, contact form and more information of my philosophy and other ways of contacting me.
Okay, that was thefulnessofyourpower.com.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So I wish you much success in all your endeavors, and I hope that you can fulfill your meaningful mission and help many people.
Thank you very much. And thank you for doing this podcast. I think it's important when so much of our society seems focused on doing, you have to produce, you have to keep up with the Joneses. I really appreciate that you're looking at it's not just what you do, but who you are. And I think that's very important. So thank you for sharing this with the world.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you to all of you who have joined us. God willing, until we meet again, wishing all of you health, happiness, success, and blessings.